yeah, that makes sense to me. Cool. So something that came up at the recent CWS Summit, something that comes up all the time, always on LinkedIn or wherever, people talking about statement of work, services procurement, outsourcing. What's the deal with the terminology? It's something that as a tech provider, we've been round the houses with and we've wrestled with, and we're having conversations all the time with clients who are dealing with these problems. You're obviously in the same situation where you're talking to customers all the time about this sort of thing, and you've been, spearheading the work around services procurement within a fairly small community, people who've been doing that in the kind of MSP and staffing space for the last few years. What's your take on the terminology? Where have you landed with it? Pardon me.
So I think there's a couple of ways to answer this question. The first is that we as an industry are almost, Olympic quality at overcomplicating things that don't need to be overcomplicated. And one of the reasons that happens is because many people in the service provider environment sort of feel that is a way to differentiate.
Yeah.
And if you're a customer on the end of that and you go along to a SIA summit or you read Everest information, whatever it might be, then, that tends to sort of stick in your mind about, well, that must be what I must be asking for, then this is how I'm going to differentiate. So the first thing is to strip it back to what actually are you trying to do? So two things. One is a statement of work. It's a contract mechanism. It is a bit of paper that determines what you do for what money and how you're going to do it. But you can apply that to any form of actual business service requirement. And so the best way to simplify this is to say, I'm actually engaging somebody, a third party, to do something for my business. What are they trying to do? And depending on the nature of the work they're doing, it's either something that can be outcome-based or it's something that you're paying for their time. If you're paying for their time, you contract in a certain way. If you're buying an outcome, you contract in another way. So this whole idea of services management, it very, very simply, it's to bring in third parties to your organization to deliver a variety of different things that support your infrastructure and way of working. Everything else around it becomes purely a contract mechanism. And so if you strip it back to that first question, which is what do you want to do, everything else then becomes far simpler to then really understand. The challenge we have as an industry is by putting all these different definitions in place, you start with the type of worker, not the nature of the work. And once you start with the type of worker, you go down these different channels and you try and put in rules and hurdles and policies and bureaucracies. And all of those do is actually make it harder for a service provider to actually bring value to an organization. The other thing we've got to recognize, and it's sort of the elephant in the room, is that it also depends on how companies account for resourcing. And if you give someone a budget to operate their function on, and it doesn't matter how they utilize third-party resourcing, and that gives you a lot more scope in terms of how you deliver a solution to them. But if you have much harder and faster rules around, well, this counts towards headcount or this doesn't, then again, it almost breeds that complexity. So I'm all for total and utter boundary elimination. Everything's about the nature of the work. And then on top of that is whatever is the right way to engage and manage and contract a third party to deliver that type of